Beneath the turquoise waters of the Great Barrier Reef, a romantic tale took an unforeseen turn, leaving behind a mystery that has fascinated and haunted many. This is the story of Tina Watson, a journey that started with love and adventure but ended in tragedy and unanswered questions. Tina, a young and adventurous woman, embarked on a life-changing journey when she met her future husband, Gabe Watson. Their love story unfolded against the backdrop of the stunning Australian coastline, promising a lifetime of shared adventures. Tina Watson was born in West Germany on February 13, 1977, and placed for adoption. On January 24, 1980, she was officially adopted by Tommy and Cindy Thomas. Growing up with her younger sister, the family initially resided in Walker County, Alabama, before moving to Birmingham and eventually settling in Louisiana in 1990. Described as a bright and joyful individual, Tina's presence was said to light up the lives of those around her. During her childhood, Tina was diagnosed with paroxysmal supraventricular tachycardia, PSVT, a condition marked by an abnormally fast heart rhythm, leading to symptoms like shortness of breath, lightheadedness, sweating, and palpitations. The prescribed medications provided limited relief and instead sapped her energy. At the age of 24, Tina underwent a minor procedure to address her PSVT. She pursued her education at the University of Alabama at Birmingham and, during that time, became engaged to Scott McCulloch. Unfortunately, their engagement was called off due to disapproval from Tina's mother. Later, Tina entered into a relationship with Gabe Watson. Born on March 5, 1977, David Gabe Watson, commonly known as Gabe, was recognized for his amiable and affable nature, easily forging connections with everyone he encountered. Smitten by Tina, they began their relationship shortly after meeting at a New Year's Eve celebration, despite Tina initially rebuffing his numerous attempts to ask her out. Following their graduation from the University of Alabama, Tina pursued a managerial role in a clothing store, while Gabe joined his father's company. Gabe, purportedly a qualified certified rescue diver, harbored a keen interest in scuba diving and engaged in the activity frequently. In contrast, Tina did not share the same enthusiasm for scuba diving. In January 2003, Tina initiated scuba diving lessons to share in Gabe's passion for the activity. Concerns arose among Tina's parents due to her previous heart condition, PSVT. Tommy, Tina's father, approached Gabe, expressing his worry about Tina's health. However, Gabe dismissed the concerns, asserting that both partners should engage in activities the other loved. Despite Tommy's uncertainty when Gabe inquired about authorizing their marriage, Gabe remained unperturbed. Gabe playfully teased Tina with a wedding ring but never formally proposed, citing a need for the right timing. On April 20, 2003, during an Easter egg hunt at their home, Gabe concealed an engagement ring within an egg and proposed to Tina after she discovered it. This gesture left Tina's parents displeased, viewing Gabe as someone who acted without considering others' opinions, and his desires always took precedence without scrutiny. On September 26, 2003, Tina approached her father, expressing the need to increase her life insurance and designate Gabe as the sole beneficiary. Skeptical and uncertain about the urgency, Tina's father hesitated and brushed off the matter until their return from the honeymoon. On October 11, 2003, Tina and Gabe exchanged vows of marriage. Immediately after their wedding, they embarked on their honeymoon the following day, heading to Australia for a 2-week getaway. During the initial week, they explored Sydney, and in the second week, they ventured to Townsville, Queensland. While in Townsville, they boarded the Spoilsport cruise ship, engaging in 25 scuba dives across various reef sites. Despite Tina's limited experience with only 5 dives compared to Gabe's 55, she felt secure due to Gabe's training as a rescue diver. As the couple prepared for a more challenging dive, Gabe declined the option of bringing a professional diver along, insisting on his certification and asserting his competence. However, concerns arose when Gabe encountered issues with his dive computer, causing unease for Tina. The dive computer was designed to track the duration and depth of dives, providing an estimate of the safe time to stay underwater before resurfacing. The particular dive they undertook was considered challenging due to its depth and the ocean's strong currents. With limited assistance available on the boat in case of emergencies, Gabe, before the dive, requested additional weight for Tina to enable her to descend further. Once Tina received the added weight, they began their descent. However, within a few minutes underwater, Gabe observed Tina displaying signs of concern and struggling to signal that something was amiss. According to Gabe, Tina accidentally dislodged his breathing mask, inducing a moment of panic. While fixing his mask, Gabe became distracted and, upon resolving the issue, observed Tina sinking towards the ocean floor. Despite being purportedly a certified rescue diver, Gabe, akin to lifeguards, swam to the surface and headed to the boat for assistance. Meanwhile, an underwater instructor named Wade, who was also submerged, noticed Tina's predicament, intervened, and brought her to the surface. Wade then transported Tina to another boat named Jazz 2, where he administered CPR for over half an hour. When questioned about his decision to leave Tina underwater, Gabe cited his lack of knowledge on how to bring someone back to the surface as his rationale. Without checking on Tina's well-being or whereabouts, Gabe returned to the original boat instead. Observers on the boat noted Gabe's peculiar behavior, expressing concern about his lack of apparent distress and his unusual requests for hugs from everyone. When assistance finally arrived, Tina was transported to the hospital. At the hospital, medical personnel found it unusual that Tina had very little water in her lungs, considering the circumstances where one would typically expect more water inhalation. Wade, the underwater instructor, also found it strange that Tina had sunk as scuba divers, unless weighted, are naturally buoyant and do not typically sink. When Wade swam to rescue Tina, he observed that she was wearing all her weights, prompting him to release her weight belt to expedite her ascent to the surface. During the subsequent investigation, detectives uncovered that Tina had been carrying 20 pounds of weight when only 8 pounds were necessary. Tragically, despite the efforts, Tina could not be saved and passed away at the hospital. Several divers who participated in the same dive asserted that they witnessed Gabe giving Tina a bear hug underwater while she was struggling. One of the divers took a photograph of his wife, and upon developing the photos, they realized that Tina was seen in the background at the bottom of the ocean, lying face up. During the questioning by detectives, Gabe's account was inconsistent, and there were contradictions in his narrative about how Tina sank. Gabe chose to communicate the details to his parents over the phone. Surprisingly, he declined to engage in a conversation with Tina's parents and instructed his parents to relay the information to them. The coroner concluded that Tina's cause of death was drowning, ruling it as an accidental occurrence without any signs of foul play. Tina's father was left in utter disbelief at these findings. Gabe, together with Tina's body, were flown back to the United States 5 days afterward. The funeral, attended by various family members and friends, witnessed a unanimous sentiment among them that Gabe's behavior was inappropriate. Whilst standing in front of the open casket, Gabe turned to his friend and said, "At least her breast looked perky." In adherence to the routine, Gabe later that year sent Tina's family a Christmas card featuring a picture of both of them from their wedding. On the card, Gabe penned his thoughts, "Who's that sexy guy next to Tina? Oh yeah, that's me." After the situation stabilized, Gabe attempted to file a claim against the travel agency for the disrupted trip. However, the insurance company notified him that neither Tina's life insurance nor the injuries sustained during scuba diving were covered by the insurance policy. Despite not believing a word of the account, Tina's father, Tommy, sensed the need to delve deeper into the situation. Several individuals from Spoilsport ship approached Tommy to assist him in uncovering the truth about his daughter. Following a conversation with one of the ship's crew members, he discovered that Gabe was not present on the ship during Tina's resuscitation. Motivated by this revelation, Tommy resolved to fly to Australia and conduct his investigation. Upon arriving in Australia, the initial individual Tommy engaged with was the diver responsible for bringing Tina to the surface of the ocean. Following discussions with the police and a meticulous examination of the case, the Townsville police concurred that there was substantial evidence indicating the possibility of foul play. In July 2004, a determination was made to classify the case not as an accident, but as a criminal investigation. The police highlighted numerous discrepancies in Gabe's narrative and the evidence presented. Contrary to Gabe's account, Tina's body was not located where he claimed it to be. Gabe asserted encountering 2 divers on his way to the surface, urging them to assist Tina, yet police discovered no supporting evidence of these alleged encounters. Two other divers who were observing from a distance refuted Gabe's claim, asserting that there was no one in the vicinity of Gabe and Tina. Gabe's assertion that he rapidly ascended to assist Tina contradicted his dive computer data, which indicated a more deliberate ascent. Examination of Tina's dive computer revealed multiple rapid resurfacing instances during their scuba dive, suggesting panic. Detectives deduced that Tina, uncomfortable with diving, needed extra support, a fact later confirmed by her scuba instructor in court, emphasizing her lack of experience. The minimal amount of water in Tina's lungs suggested she likely passed out during the dive, her mouth relaxing off the mouthpiece, allowing water entry. Suspicions arose that Gabe may have deliberately cut off Tina's air until she lost consciousness, then resumed before leaving her submerged, potentially explaining her struggles witnessed by others. This theory was contested by dive experts who deemed it nearly impossible for Tina to reach the surface before running out of air. Further investigation revealed Gabe's proficiency in ocean rescues, prompting inquiries into the diving company's practices. It was uncovered that Gabe had misrepresented his diving experience, marking only 15 ocean dives instead of accurately portraying his skills. The company, misled by Gabe's repeated claims of being a certified diver, failed to assign a trained diver to accompany them, neglecting to address Tina's underwater panic, a crucial detail omitted by Gabe in his communications with the company. Tommy also shared that whenever he visited Tina's grave, the flowers he left mysteriously vanished, leading him to suspect theft. Gabe, expressing a desire to relocate Tina's body to his plot, moved her grave without placing a headstone, leaving it unmarked for 3 years. Upon discovering the new location, Tommy continued leaving flowers, only to find them gone the next day, and sometimes within hours. Disturbed by this, Tommy reported the situation to the police, prompting them to set up a camera near the grave to identify the culprit. The footage ultimately captured Gabe taking the flowers, with his justification being Tina's purported dislike for plastic flowers. Meanwhile, Gabe entered into a relationship with another lady identified as Kim, whom he married in August 2008. Australian authorities flew to Alabama to delve deeper into the case, uncovering unsettling information about Gabe's true character. It was revealed that Tina and Gabe had previously broken up before their engagement due to frequent quarrels, and during their separation, Tina went on a date, eliciting Gabe's furious reaction. Gabe resorted to name-calling and harassment. Despite reconciling and Gabe proposing to Tina, the police speculated that a potential motive for Gabe's actions could be linked to a life insurance payout. In May 2009, Gabe was extradited to Australia to face trial after reaching an agreement to lower the charges from murder to manslaughter. During the trial, he was found guilty of manslaughter and initially sentenced to 4.5 years. However, the judge opted to suspend the sentence to 12 months. The Alabama Attorney General contested the leniency of the sentence, filing an appeal that was approved, leading to an extension of the sentence to 18 months. Subsequently, the Alabama Attorney General sought to bring the case back to the United States for a retrial in Alabama, asserting the presence of additional evidence not presented during the Australian court proceedings. Australia insisted on a guarantee that Alabama would not pursue the death penalty before allowing any evidence from Australia to be transferred to the United States. Alabama agreed to the condition, leading to Gabe's return to the US, where he was taken into police custody for a retrial in Alabama. The Attorney General filed 2 charges, one for capital murder and another for kidnapping with deception. It was alleged that Gabe deceived Tina into taking diving lessons and traveling to Australia. Meanwhile, the Alabama courts removed Gabe as the administrator of Tina's estate, granting the role to Tina's father, Tommy. Despite Tommy's request for Tina's personal belongings, Gabe failed to return them. The trial commenced on February 13, 2012, coinciding with what would have been Tina's 35th birthday. However, peculiarly, the court in Alabama prohibited the mention of evidence about Gabe's unusual behavior and disallowed raising the life insurance claim. With this crucial evidence excluded, the judge determined insufficient grounds to convict Gabe of murder, resulting in his acquittal on all charges. Gabe claimed to be at peace with the verdict and expressed a desire to rebuild his life, but Tina's family was left without the closure they sought. Tina's untimely death cast a shadow over the dreams of a young couple in love, leaving her family and friends grappling with the pain of loss and the mystery surrounding that fateful day on the Great Barrier Reef. In the aftermath, The community came together to remember Tina, a vibrant spirit lost too soon, and to reflect on the fragility of life in the face of seemingly serene waters. The Tina Watson story is a somber reminder that even in the most beautiful places, tragedy can strike. May her memory inspire conversations about safety, transparency, and the pursuit of truth in the face of life's deepest mysteries. In the coastal charm of South Carolina, a story unfolded that would captivate the nation. The mysterious disappearance of Heather Rochelle Elvis. Nestled in the heart of Myrtle Beach, Heather's life was a blend of southern warmth and vibrant dreams, until an unexpected turn of events led to a puzzle that still echoes through the quiet seaside town. Heather, with her vivacious spirit and dreams of a brighter future, was a beloved daughter and sister. Her magnetic personality left an impression on everyone she met, but as the story unfolds, we'll discover that beneath the surface, some secrets and twists would shape the narrative of her life. Heather Rochelle Elvis was born on June 30, 1993, in Horry County, South Carolina, to Terry and Debbie Elvis. She was described as determined, the life of the party, free-spirited, and had a huge personality. She enjoyed doing makeup and wished to pursue it as a career. Heather was a talented, cheerful, and supposedly happy 20-year-old girl. She was very artistic and would frequently share her thoughts and interests on social media. Heather was known to be a bit rebellious as she lived her life the way that she wanted to and didn't waste any time caring about what other people thought about her. After graduating from St. James High School in Murrells Inlet in 2011, and eager to experience her independence, her parents allowed her to move into her apartment in Myrtle Beach with her best friend Brianna. To support herself while studying cosmetology, Heather had 2 part-time jobs, one at the House of Blues in North Myrtle Beach and the other at a Scottish-themed restaurant called the Tilted Kiln in Myrtle Beach. She had a good job, great friends, a tight-knit family, and everything in her life seemed to be on track. But like every 20-year-old girl, there were secrets and things that her family did not know about and would not find out about until it was too late. One day in the summer of 2013, Heather was working her usual shift at the Tilted Kiln when an older man caught her eye. This was the maintenance worker, Sidney Moorer. Sidney was a 37-year-old married man who had 3 children. His wife, Tammy, was a 40-year-old stay-at-home mother and a part-time travel agent whom he had been married to since 1997. Sidney had his own maintenance company and would come by to repair things in the restaurant's kitchen. It was no secret that Heather had a crush on Sidney, even though he was much older, and the two of them would engage in harmless flirting at work. Heather would tell her friend Brianna about what he said to her and what they did. She was completely smitten with this man. Heather, who was also very active on her social media accounts, was not shy in tweeting about her feelings towards Sidney. On June 12, 2013, she tweeted, "I got a taste for older men." On July 7th, 1 month later, she tweeted, "The guy who builds things at my job makes me want to cream myself." On the same day, she tweeted, "One of these days I'm going to drag that man into the mop closet and have my way with him." It soon became clear that Sidney was also attracted to Heather, and the two began an affair. Sidney would often bring Heather coffee and bagels when she was at work, even on his days off. They would text each other back and forth, and the relationship soon turned physical. At 7:12 p.m. on July 10th, Heather tweeted, "Baby did a bad thing." A minute later, she followed up with, "I'm in way too deep, but watch me get in deeper." Heather was head over heels in love with Sidney. She told her sister how much they loved each other and how they saw a future together. Throughout the affair, Heather was aware that Sidney had a wife. However, Sidney had told her that he was in an open marriage and was no longer in love with Tammy. He even claimed that Tammy had a boyfriend of her own, and they were only living together for financial reasons and the sake of the kids. Being young and naive, this was exactly what Heather had wanted to hear, and she believed every word. Her friends didn't approve of their relationship because he was 17 years older than Heather, and on top of that, Sidney was a married man. He had been married for 15 years, to his wife, 40-year-old Tammy. The affair was not a secret at Heather's workplace, and she would often be teased by her colleagues. The situation began to get out of hand, to the point where some colleagues wrote on a mirror at work, "Stop f***ing a married man, okay, thanks." One of the girls also phoned the restaurant posing as Tammy looking for Heather. Heather panicked and left work straight away, thinking that Tammy was going to show up at any moment. Their affair lasted until September 2013, when Heather tweeted, "Once upon a time, an angel and a devil fell in love. It did not end well," referring to her relationship with Sydney. Tammy found out about the affair, and it's not clear how she found out, but she did, and people close to Heather said that once the affair had been discovered by Tammy, it was like all hell broke loose. Soon after discovering her husband's affair with the young waitress, Tammy phoned Heather saying, "You're going to end it with my husband." Tammy then put Sydney on the phone and listened, while Sydney began to tell Heather that she meant nothing to him, that it was over, and that she was just someone who spread their legs, amongst other insults. That greatly knocked Heather's confidence and self-worth. Over the next few weeks, she tried to focus on rebuilding herself and directing her sights on her goals and work. Tammy, however, was only just getting started. Tammy forced Sydney to get her name tattooed above his crotch and was overheard telling him, "Well, this wouldn't have happened if you didn't mess around with that girl." She would also handcuff him to the bed at night so that he could not sneak out. Over the next few weeks, Tammy continued to send nasty texts to Heather, and she even once called Heather 40 times in a single day. Heather believed that taunting Tammy was the best way to deal with the situation, saying things like, "Why are you texting me? You should be worried about your husband." Tammy would take it a step further and send Heather pictures of both Tammy and Sydney in bed together, getting intimate. Tammy continued to contact Heather asking, "Hey sweetie, ready to meet the missus?" Heather responded a couple of days later on November 1st saying, "I think you're a little obsessed with me. No need to worry about me anymore." On November 5th, Tammy responded, "By the way, Dad no longer owns a phone," referring to Sydney's lack of a phone, which prevented her from contacting him. Tammy also tried to get Heather fired from the Tilted Kilt, calling the restaurant every day and telling them that Sydney would no longer fix things as long as Heather was working there. It was also reported that Sydney texted Heather again, saying that Tammy wasn't entitled to feel the way she did about the affair and act the way she did because she too had a lover, but this turned out to be a lie. They both agreed to call it quits because nothing good was coming from it. Heather, on the other hand, told Sydney that she wanted Tammy to stop calling the restaurant because she lost hours of work and was sent home because Tammy kept calling. Heather and Sydney last saw each other on November 5th after they agreed to end their relationship. On Twitter, she retweeted a tweet by a comedian that you could say was a little personal. The tweet read, "Hey married fellas, you can either cheat on your wife or murder her. Never both, because that is when you get caught." Heartbroken, but remaining determined to move on from the situation, Heather continued to work on herself, with those close to her commenting on how she had got her smile back. Things also started to look up for Heather when she was offered a job in a beauty salon. She was one step closer to her dream job. As for the texts and calls from Tammy, Heather began to get used to them and continued to ignore them, thinking that Tammy would eventually get bored and move on. On November 19th, Sydney and Tammy decided to buy a brand new black Ford F-150 and drive to California with their children to visit Disneyland as a way to rekindle their romance, whereby the trip lasted 3 weeks. Meanwhile, despite Heather's life taking a turn for the better, it would not be long before those around her began to notice that she was gaining weight, so much so that she had to be given a new uniform at work as her usual one no longer fit. Heather went from having a size A cup size on her bra to a size C cup, and she also went from a medium-sized skirt to a large. These are all changes that are typically associated with someone pregnant, so finally Heather took a test at work one day, and it came back invalid. It is not known for certain whether or not Heather was pregnant, but it was considered a very strong possibility given the changes in her physical appearance and the fact that she was known to be having a very intimate relationship with Sydney Moorer. Her confidence was coming back, and she organized a date with a guy who was closer to her age that she'd been talking to for quite a while. Things were looking good for Heather. It was 17th of December 2013 when Heather headed out for her date. They hadn't planned anything specific and were eager to get to know one another a little better. They went out to eat and ended up driving around and looking at Christmas lights, as it was one of Heather's favorite things to do during the Christmas holidays, and then later her date, Stephen Schiraldi, took her to the Inlet Mall, where he taught her how to drive a stick shift in his truck. Her date had also snapped a picture of her as she tried out driving his car. Heather sent this picture of herself having fun on her date to her best friend Brianna, whom she lived with, and her dad, Terry. The date started around 10 p.m. and ended just after 1 a.m., with Heather being dropped off at her apartment with plans to meet her date again the next day for a second date. Unfortunately, this would be the final confirmed sighting of Heather Elvis. Just over half an hour later, after having arrived back at her apartment, Heather received a call from Sydney Moorer. This was completely unexpected, as the pair had not had contact in weeks. During the 4-minute phone call, which had been made from a payphone, Sydney apologized to Heather and expressed his love for her. He even confided in her that he had left Tammy in the hopes of being with her instead. At 1:44 a.m., Heather called her roommate Brianna, who was out of town visiting relatives, in tears. She told her that Sydney had phoned her to confess his love for her. Sydney would later deny this phone call ever took place until he was forced to admit it when the police had CCTV footage of him making a call at that same payphone at that time. Heather's roommate told her to think properly about it and not mess up all the great progress she had made in the past few weeks over him. Heather said that she would think about it, do some internet browsing, and then go to bed, but Heather could not sleep that night. At 2:29 a.m., Heather tried to call the number that Sydney had previously called several times, but received no answer. At 3:16 a.m., Heather tried to call Sydney's mobile phone, but again, received no answer. Refusing to give up, Heather called Sydney's mobile phone again. This time she got through, and the phone call lasted for just over 4 minutes. What was said during this phone call is unknown, but after the call, Heather got into her car and drove to a place called Peachtree Boat Landing, a place situated just 3 miles from Sydney and Tammy's home. Sydney also later denied that this phone call took place too, until he was forced to admit it after the police confronted him with Heather's phone record. He then said that he did talk to her, but only to tell her to leave him alone. At 3:38 a.m., Heather arrived at Peachtree Boat Landing. She again tried to call Sydney's phone, but she received no answer. She tried multiple times after to call again at 3:39 a.m., 3:41 a.m., and 3:46 a.m., but there was still no answer from Sydney. When Heather was trying to reach Sydney on his mobile, 2 CCTV cameras picked up a vehicle, a black Ford F-150, which was similar to that owned by Sydney and Tammy Moorer, coming from the direction of their house and headed towards Peachtree Boat Landing. The following evening, Heather's car, which was a green Dodge Intrepid, was found parked at Peachtree Landing on the Waccamaw River by a local policeman who was patrolling the area. After running the license plate and discovering that the car was registered to Heather's father, Terry Elvis, police went to her parents' house. The police questioned Heather's dad about the car, and Terry had a spare set of keys, so they went to the car, and they noticed that her keys, ID, purse, and phone were not inside. The police then allowed Terry to search the car and then let him drive it home. Terry tried calling her over and over again, but the call would just go straight to voicemail. When the police went to her apartment, they didn't find Heather there, and they also noticed that she didn't show up for work. The search for missing Heather Elvis was now underway. Friends and family created posters and leaflets and set up the Facebook page, Find Heather Elvis. Whilst police were looking for Heather and doing their investigations, suspicions soon quickly fell on Sydney and Tammy Moorer due to the evidence of the texts, phone calls, and public knowledge of the affair between Heather and Sydney. Sydney and Tammy would also post on Facebook about the situation and spoke very disrespectfully of Heather and her family. Sydney posted, "Heather was a girl who traded fellatio for pumpkin-spiced lattes, amongst other things." Tammy also posted messages including a lengthy status. "Well, Sydney cheated on me in the months of September-October with a psycho whore who has since gone missing." Evidence against Sydney kept piling up. The detectives noted his pickup leaving the Peachtree Landing area at 3:45 a.m. They searched it and found out that he had detached the GPS system on the night of December 18th, which hindered detectives from confirming that the car on CCTV had been his. With no concrete evidence, Sydney was let go whilst detectives continued the investigation. On February 21st, 2014, Sydney and Tammy Moorer were arrested and charged with kidnapping, obstruction of justice, and 2 charges of indecent exposure after an 11-hour search. They were charged with indecent exposure for taking sexually explicit pictures of themselves in public areas, as well as obstruction of justice for lying to police about the payphone. On February 24, 2014, police held a press conference and announced that they had been charged with Heather Elvis's murder. They claimed to have discovered evidence that led them to suspect Sydney and Tammy kidnapped and murdered Heather. Sydney and Tammy were released from prison after 11 months in 2015. Their bond was set at $100,000 per person. At the bond hearing, prosecutors stated that there was no direct link between them and Heather's disappearance. The Moorer family claimed they were threatened by the Elvis family, so they had a tracking system installed and were advised to avoid the Elvis family, including on social media. The murder charges were dismissed without prejudice in March 2016, which means they could charge them again with murder if they chose to. The kidnapping charges were also reduced to pending. They also dropped the charges of indecent exposure against both of them. On June 20, 2016, Sydney's trial for the kidnapping of Heather Elvis began, and it was revealed in court that Heather was possibly pregnant. The detectives discovered that when Sydney went to Walmart, he purchased a pregnancy test and cigars. Afterward, Sydney then went to the payphone to call Heather and then to meet up with Heather. Sydney explained that the pregnancy test was for Tammy because they were trying for a child. Even though the Moorers' home security footage showed them washing their car after December 18th, burning rags, and also having a receipt for a pregnancy test in their possession, Sydney's kidnapping charge resulted in a mistrial after the jury was hung, which occurs when the jury is unable to reach an agreement. With no body and no evidence that Sydney murdered Heather, 10 of the jury members wanted to convict him, while 2 did not. In August of 2017, Sydney went to trial again, this time for the obstruction of justice charges, and was found guilty. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Meanwhile, the prosecution made plans to retry Sydney for kidnapping in the future. In October 2018, 5 years after Heather went missing, Tammy was put on trial for kidnapping and conspiracy. At the trial, it was revealed that Tammy was infuriated by her husband's affair with Heather, especially after rumors began to circulate that Heather was pregnant in December 2013. Moreover, a family friend of the Moorers, named Donald DeMarino, testified that he saw an image of Heather on Tammy's phone at a family cookout that was held after Heather went missing. Donald mentioned that in the image, it did not appear that Heather was able to walk or talk. He was allegedly so distressed by said image that he left the cookout after seeing it. The image in question was not shown, nor were any additional details given. However, this testimony and all the other evidence provided by the prosecution were enough to convince the jury to reach a guilty verdict in a little under 2 hours. She was found guilty and sentenced to 30 years in prison on both counts, and she was eligible for parole after serving a specific amount of time. They have never disclosed what happened to Heather Elvis that night in December 2013, and they both have been trying to appeal their convictions for years, insisting they're innocent, yet to no avail. Today, 47-year-old Sydney is incarcerated at the maximum security Lee Correctional Institution in Bishopville with a projected release date of March 31, 2044, and 50-year-old Tammy is at the medium security Leith Correctional Institution in Greenwood with a projected release date of May 9, 2043. To this day, no trace of Heather Elvis has ever been found. A tribute garden has been set up at Peachtree Boat Landing in dedication to her. Heather's disappearance left an indelible void in the lives of her family and friends. The pain they endured, the questions left unanswered, and the yearning for closure became an enduring chapter in the story of Myrtle Beach. The Myrtle Beach community, bound by a shared hope for answers, rallied together in search efforts and vigils. The story of Heather resonated far beyond the coastal town, echoing the challenges of navigating the complexities of love and relationships. As we remember Heather Rochelle Elvis, may her memory be a reminder of the fragility of life and the importance of compassion and understanding. In the tranquil suburbs of Delaware County, Pennsylvania, the lives of Jennair and Mark Gerardo seem to mirror the idyllic setting. Professionally successful, socially accomplished, and by all appearances, living the American dream. However, their story took an unforeseen and tragic turn that would shatter the calm of their suburban existence. Jenna, an accomplished woman in her own right, and Mark, a respected professional, harbored complexities beneath the surface of their seemingly perfect life. What began as a tale of success and love evolved into a narrative of betrayal and heartbreak. Jenna Gerardo was born Jenna Cox on December 19, 1970, in the city of Fort Wayne, Allen County, Indiana, USA. She grew up in the area until her late teenage years. She was a graduate of Bishop Lewis High School, where she took advanced courses. Jenna first attended Indiana University, Purdue University at Indianapolis, where she studied communication and was deeply involved in the theater arts and performances program at the college. She also continued with her studies in communication at Butler University. Jenna earned her BA degree in communication and theater arts. Throughout her life, she held several jobs related to marketing for several companies in the Indiana area. She worked in the city of Carmel and also Indianapolis and was the marketing manager at Circor Instrumentation for several years. In the summer of 1986, Jenna Cox met Mark Gerardo for the first time in Fort Wayne, Indiana. They were both teenagers at the time, and Jenna worked at a Taco Bell in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Mark said he was immediately attracted to her from the moment they met and commented on how beautiful blue eyes and big smile had taken his breath away. He couldn't speak. He was kind of tongue-tied. Their romance didn't begin until 4 years later, after Mark ran into Jenna again and found out that she was by then working at a nearby mall. He started visiting her often, and one day he said she pressed him to make a move, asking him when he was going to take her out. She said, "Are you going to ask me out, or what?" he said. I was quite shy. It was this honesty that drew Mark to Jenna. Mark said that Jenna was confident and unafraid to speak her mind, adding that her demeanor was the exact opposite of me. Melissa Murphy, a childhood friend of Jenna, said she remembered when Jenna met Mark. She said, "This is the one," and was so excited to an extent she could do anything for Mark. On October 23, 1993, Mark and Jenna got married. Mark was 25 years, and Jenna was 23 years at the time, and together they cemented a relationship that began in adolescence and carried them into adulthood. Mark said, "We were happy. I couldn't imagine not being with Jenna for the rest of my life." Just as with any other relationship, Mark and his partner Jenna had to deal with low points in their marriage. He said that his arguments with his wife could be epic, and that she would always win because she was always going to have the last word. One of Mark's high school friends, Mike Hartman, said, "I wasn't privy to all the behind the scene of their relationship and their life together, but I know there were intense disagreements, intense to things." The couple maintained a strong marriage, but when the financial crisis struck in 2008, Mark would later be quoted saying that changed everything for us. Money had often been a concern and a source of stress for the couple, whereby both of them would often find that it was the main source of many of their arguments. In November 2011, they both moved to Greenville, South Carolina, where they both found new jobs in marketing. With the new environment and frequent exploring the state's beautiful mountains and beaches, Mark said they experienced a little bit of restoration for their marriage, which had brought them much closer than before. Everything was going on well for the next few years until 2017, when their renewed life in South Carolina came to a halt. Jenna had been laid off from her job and was having difficulty getting a new one. She lost confidence in herself and was becoming much less strong than the woman she had once been. It was around this time that the couple decided once again that it was time to search for new opportunities and a new beginning elsewhere. Finally, the couple decided that Delaware would be their new home, and immediately Mark began his search for a job opportunity. He saw that the University of Delaware was hiring a creative director in its marketing department, and if successful, he would be the supervisor. He sent an email applying for the role and received an instant message back from a lady 15 years his junior who would be his new boss, offering him an interview. His concerns that a woman 15 years his junior would be managing him subsided almost immediately. This marked the beginning of Mark Gerardo's first encounter with Meredith Chapman. Meredith Chapman was a native of Pennsylvania and was 33 years old at the time. She was a graduate of the University of Delaware with a bachelor's degree in communication and a master's degree in education. Meredith was also married to a man by the name of Luke, a former Newark City councilman. The couple had married in 2009 and lived in Fairfield Crest, Delaware with their dog Indy. When Mark attended his interview, he found that he was immediately attracted to Meredith, not only her beauty, but also her pure brilliance, saying, "When I sat across the desk from her, within 5 minutes, I didn't say it out loud, but I said, I have to work for this person." He further said, "She was so articulate and so energetic and passionate about the job and accomplished at her age to be in the position that she was in. I was dumbfounded." It appeared like Meredith was impressed by Mark because she immediately offered him the job, to which Mark gratefully accepted an offer for the position and moved to Wilmington, Delaware in November 2017, while his wife stayed behind in South Carolina temporarily to lease their home. Mark was excited not only because of moving to North, but also to see growth in his career, not knowing that this would be the beginning of the end of his marriage with Jen Eyre. Mark spent his 45 days living alone in Delaware as his wife remained behind to arrange for their home to be rented out. During that time, Mark said he got to know Meredith well and also stated that the two had a lot in common and that one day she had asked him out for a drink. Remembering the events of the night, Mark said it was easy to talk to Meredith, and before they had gone home, he spoke to her about his marriage to Jen Eyre, even if it was not necessarily in a negative way, and also told Meredith about losing his parents and his brother. Mark didn't know what was transpiring, stating, "I really didn't know what was happening." He went on to say, "I knew it felt amazing to be around Meredith, and I was confused by the feelings I was having, to be honest, until it became a little bit more forward with a dinner that we had. It was more of a date." Mark said the issues with his marriage also came into focus when he was with Meredith. It was during this time Mark started comparing Meredith to that of his wife, stating how Meredith started to tell him that he was good at what he does and how wonderful a man he was, something he said he had never heard from his wife's lips. Mark was hopelessly in love, stating, "That just made an impression on me. Here's this woman I think is amazing saying that she thinks I'm a wonderful man." 1 month after meeting Meredith, Mark said that the two kissed for the first time. He further said that while the energy was there, he immediately felt awful for betraying his wife and told Meredith that whatever was about to happen couldn't be because he cared for his wife. Nonetheless, he soon realized that he also couldn't give up on the feelings he was developing for Meredith, who he said had told him she was 9 years into an unhappy marriage herself. Mark said, "I felt enthralled. It was such a connection. To shut it down just didn't feel right. I had to at least find out what it was that drew us together." Before Jen Eyre had joined her husband in Delaware, her husband and Meredith had already expressed their love for each other, with Mark saying, "It felt right," to tell Meredith that he loved her and that it was a very powerful feeling. In December 2017, Jen Eyre moved north, and Mark said she could sense he was distant, and it wasn't long before she confronted him about her feeling that there could be another woman. Mark said, "She finally asked me, 'What is up with you?' You're acting different," he continued. "She said specifically, 'It's Meredith, isn't it?'" This was after Mark had mentioned Meredith several times when speaking about his new job. Although her husband denied the affair at first, Jen Eyre would not let it go. She continued to question his relationship with Meredith. Aware that there was something between the two, Jen Eyre began to pay attention to her husband, making sure she knew what he was up to at any given time. He further said that Jen Eyre mysteriously knew things about him and Meredith, and that he couldn't understand how she knew them. Close to February 14th, 2018, Valentine's Day, Jen Eyre finally got the proof she had been looking for. However, Mark's admission of an affair with Meredith came at the cost of Jen Eyre, who admitted to him that she had hired a company to gain access to his phone, permitting her to read his text messages and also view his photos and records of calls he had exchanged with Meredith. Mark admitted the truth to Jen Eyre that he had indeed fallen for Meredith because he knew he could not keep up with the lie any longer. Heartbroken and refusing to give up on her husband, Jen Eyre asked Mark to attend a marriage counseling, which he agreed to attend, but on the day of their second session, Mark said he was putting on his jacket when he felt something bulging in the lining of his coat. Even though at first he believed it to be an anti-theft device that had been left inside, he decided to cut the jacket open and discovered a recording device, and with its lights already flashing, it was recording him at that very moment. At that particular time, Mark was very furious and went ahead and confronted his wife. In response to his wife, Mark said, "She told me she wanted to understand the degree to which Meredith and I were in the relationship. She was determined there was a plan between Meredith and I, and she was trying to listen to what that plan was. From then on, the relationship between Mark and Meredith would fall apart at an accelerated rate. Finally, Mark told Jenner that he planned on filing for divorce in May of 2018 after he had met Delaware residency requirements and could move out of their shared house. During this time, things were going well, particularly for Meredith Chapman, who had been offered a new job as the assistant vice president at Villanova University in Pennsylvania and moved to Radnor Township, Pennsylvania, which is part of the Main Line region. Meredith and her husband were getting divorced as well so that she could continue to follow her new relationship with Mark and could, in the end, be together. As Meredith and Mark's relationship continued to grow, Jenner started to see divorce coach Sheila Brennan, who said Jenner had a lot of bitterness and anger about being tossed away and being traded in for a younger woman, and that her client had a lot of fears about being left financially. Didn't she had just moved north and had not found a new job 1 year after losing the previous one? Things seemed to go from bad to worse for Jenner, and finally, all this had destroyed her mental health. Mark recommended that she see a psychiatrist and also asked her to seek support from family and friends, since she had even threatened to jump out of the window. Mark said she took the advice and that she seemed to have accepted the forthcoming divorce. Jenner approached her husband one day with a list of requests for the weeks leading up to him officially moving out. Mark said he believed that they had gotten through the worst things, but little did he know that this was far from the truth, and the worst was yet to come. Among the items on her list were going on hikes, having dinner, and generally spending some time together. Mark agreed to play along with Jenner's requests, stating, "It was odd, but I'm trying to land this thing so she is in a good place. If this is what she needed, then I was going to do that." Mark said his wife was acting normal for the most part, although she would occasionally break down and cry over the next few weeks. Jenner also began posting on the neighborhood app Nextdoor, asking for recommendations for an excellent marriage counselor for couple on brink of divorce. She went on, writing, "We will need someone who is very educated and experienced dealing with couples' issues including infidelity, depression, traumatic experiences, child-parents dynamics, being accountable for actions. However, in secret, she had been planning revenge." On the night of April 23, 2018, Mark and Jenner were supposed to meet for dinner to discuss the divorce agreement. But in a series of messages, Jenner informed her husband, who was already at the restaurant where they were meant to meet, that she was running late before sending another text telling him to go home. She wouldn't make it. As Mark got up to leave minutes later, he received a picture from Jenner. She sent him a picture of trash with a condom in the middle, which made him believe she was searching through Meredith's trash can outside her home. Then received more text messages, one of which read, "You ruined my life." The next two messages that Jenner sent Mark read, "I hope you find never happiness," and another read, "Bye, Mark." Mark tried to text and call Meredith multiple times, fearing for her safety and afraid of what Jenner might do to her. Unfortunately, all forms of communication went unanswered. He rushed to Meredith's house expecting to find a fight between Jenner and Meredith, but when he arrived, he found something worse than he could ever thought. He found Meredith face down on her kitchen floor with a pool of blood forming around her head. Nearby, he found his wife's body also lying on the floor. Mark stated, "It took 5 seconds and I screamed an obscenity and ran to her." He continued, "I just said, 'Baby. Oh baby, what have you done?'" Meredith had gushed on her Instagram account about her position at Villanova just less than 2 hours before her death, writing that she couldn't be more excited. "Just a week on the job, and I'm already feeling the love from Nova Nation New Adventures," she posted at 5:42 p.m. Later that evening, she arrived at her home on Lowry Lane in Radnor Township, parked her Audi in the driveway, opened the door, and walked straight inside, completely unaware of the fact that Jenner had broken in and was hiding, waiting to attack her. When Mark arrived, Tim Mulvey, one of Meredith's neighbors, was there, and he said that he heard the commotion and that he went out to see what had transpired, and Mark told him to call 911. Sergeant Christopher Four of the Radnor Township Police Department said that the call made his heart sink. He stated, "We don't really receive those types of calls." He continued, "When we arrived at the scene, it was kind of chaotic. There were a lot of officers there." Mark, who seemed to be heavily breathing according to Christopher Flanagan, was placed into the back of an ambulance before he was brought to the police station as a suspect. After interrogating him and finding that the gun used in the two deaths was underneath Jenner's body, The police determined that she had broken into Meredith's home before murdering her and then killing herself. One day after the murder, suicide police received a tip from a person who said had seen a woman in a trench coat, hat, sunglasses and possible wig looking out at the house with binoculars. Police had also collected a set of car keys from the crime scene which they determined belonged to a Cadillac that Jenner had rented. Mark said learning about the Cadillac came as a surprise. He said he found all this mostly from the police and from the news. She had rented it 2 weeks before the tragedy, and it was parked right outside their apartment. Mark continued to dig. He pored over his wife's bank statements, phone records, and her computer backup, and found out that she was living a double life. After Mark admitted to the affair just after Valentine's Day, he said, Jenner opened up a secret bank account and credit cards, where she used the credit cards to purchase the audio surveillance equipment, as well as a lock-picking kit, computer hacking software, and DNA testing kits for his clothes. Mark also said she even bought sophisticated GPS tracking systems and attached them to both Mark and Meredith's car. Mark said, I think there were over 400 images of private conversations that Meredith and I had through text and Snapchat, and she would actually, in the middle of the night, get access to my phone, Mark continued. My best guess as to how she gained access. I was sleeping on the couch. She'd put my thumb onto the thumb reader. On March 20th, 2018, 5 weeks before committing the murder, Jenner bought the gun that she used in the murder-suicide. Mark said that her credit card statements revealed she had practiced shooting the gun 3 times at a firing range. Mark said Jenner had planted multiple devices in his clothes and that he found files containing hundreds of hours of audio that his wife had recorded and even transcribed the audio into notebooks. He continued, She took all my jackets and had a multitude of devices that she was cycling in and out, and that every day she would take it back out and then sew it back in, download it, and back and forth. She had done that for weeks. It came to light that on the night Jenner killed Meredith and herself, she emailed a letter to members of her family explaining her motive to a very chilling degree. She had started the letter weeks before, and she dated her entries and also wrote of how this was a payback for what he had done to her, quoting, That's as simple as it gets. Dr. Robbie Ludwig, a psychotherapist who studied homicide within marriages and read Jenner's letter, suggested that Jenner may have been pushed to kill Meredith and herself because losing the love of her life was something she could not tolerate. Dr. Robin went on to state, In my opinion, there was something about listening to the tapes that triggered rage and wound her up, Dr. Robin continued. It gave her courage to know that she was right, that he was bad. I think at some point when she gave up on life and became suicidal, that's when she became her most dangerous. I get sense that all of this was done to make him suffer. She was interested in being the judge and jury in this scenario of her own life and her husband's life. In a televised TV interview with presenter Dr. Oz Mark, revealed how his wife left a 15-page letter stating how she would have killed him too had he walked in on the crime. In the years since the event, Mark said he wishes he handled the breakup with his wife differently. He further said, I broke her heart and more than anything, out of all this, my regret comes back to breaking her heart and making her feel like she had no other choice. I wish I wouldn't have hurt her because I loved her. I still love her. I wish I could take it back. Mark said he has driven past Meredith's home several times as a way of trying to move forward, and by doing so has helped him come to terms with what happened so that he can let it go. The shockwaves of this story echoed through the neighborhood, leaving friends and neighbors grappling with the aftermath of a narrative that transcended the boundaries of typical suburban life. In the aftermath, the community came together, seeking solace and understanding, and grappling with the questions that lingered in the wake of this complex and heartbreaking tale. The Gerardo story serves as a stark reminder that human relationships are complex, and the consequences of betrayal can ripple through lives in unexpected ways. May it prompt conversations about mental health, the importance of seeking help, and the significance of fostering understanding in our communities. During the Easter weekend in April 1992, Dana Ewell informed his relatives that he couldn't reach his parents, Dale and Glee Ewell, and his sister, Tiffany Ewell. Dana was still at the family's California beach house, where he had spent the weekend with his girlfriend and her father, an FBI agent. Upon the housekeeper's arrival for duty following the Easter weekend, the discovery she made in the house sent chills down her spine. The distressed housekeeper rushed to a neighbor's home, prompting an immediate call to the police, who arrived at the scene of the grim discovery of the 3 lifeless bodies. Initially presumed to be a botched burglary, it was soon determined that nothing had been stolen, leading authorities to conclude it was a planned murder. But who could have had a motive to kill this innocent family? Investigations ensued, eliminating several potential suspects until one unlikely person emerged as the prime suspect. This is the horrifying case of the Ewell family. Dale Ewell was born in Ohio during the Great Depression, instilling in him a strong work ethic and appreciation for every single dollar he earned. His upbringing in a family that endured economic hardship likely fueled his determination and ambition. After serving in the Air Force, Dale found success as a businessman, eventually becoming the president and owner of Western Piper Sales Incorporated, a company that specialized in selling small aircraft. He expanded his financial ventures by investing in several farms with profits from Western Piper. Dale had married Glee Michelle, a woman who taught in elementary school, worked as a translator for the CIA, and served on a commission at the State Bar of California. Together, they became parents, welcoming Tiffany in 1967 and Dana in 1971. Dale's achievements afforded the Ewell family a comfortable residence in Sunnyside, a beachfront property in Pajaro Dunes, as well as luxury automobiles and designer clothes. The primary source of the Ewells' income stemmed from the sale of light aircraft and extensive investments in the stock market. Having established his aviation enterprise successfully, Dale ventured into purchasing several farms, ultimately amassing significant wealth. Dale and Glee's combined net worth was estimated at $8 million, portraying them as the epitome of the American dream, even though they maintained a modest lifestyle. While Tiffany followed in her parents' footsteps, Dana diverged significantly from their path. While attending university, Dana Ewell portrayed himself as a prosperous entrepreneur, asserting that he was the source of his family's wealth. His fabricated narrative garnered attention from a local newspaper and even made its way into Ewell's school yearbook in 1990. Enrolled at Santa Clara University, Dana was preoccupied with notions of affluence and stylish living. He possessed a BMW and had access to funds enabling him to indulge in luxury items such as jewelry at his leisure. In contrast, his older sister Tiffany, who graduated from Fresno University, exhibited a more down-to-earth demeanor. From a young age, Dana displayed a tendency to lie a lot and fabricated many of his stories. Despite his exceptional intellect and education, Dana's aspirations transcended mere comfort, wealth, and a promising future. He shared his father's ambition, but lacked the determination to pursue his goals through legitimate means. Even during his time as a student at the University of Santa Clara, Dana felt compelled to concoct grandiose tales of his achievements and importance, which were entirely false. He proved to be a pathological liar, deceiving both faculty and peers into believing he was the head of a multi-million-dollar enterprise. Within his intricate web of lies, he portrayed himself as having begun his career as a stockbroker at the age of 18, subsequently transitioning to aircraft sales and ultimately ascending to the presidency of his own aircraft manufacturing company. The underlying tension within the father-son dynamic, characterized by dwindling communication, remained largely concealed from others. Dana's habit of fabricating outlandish tales about himself likely caused embarrassment for his father and could have led to conflicts between them. Despite Dale's upbringing in modest circumstances and his generous support for his children, it appeared that Dana harbored an insatiable sense of entitlement. Despite his privileged upbringing, Dana Ewell portrayed himself as a self-absorbed, egotistical individual primarily focused on his own wealth and social status. On Sunday, April 19, 1992, Sunnyside, California experienced mild, partly sunny weather, creating an ideal Easter Sunday afternoon atmosphere. Dale, aged 59, along with his 57-year-old wife Glee and their 24-year-old daughter Tiffany, had spent the Easter weekend at their beach house. Glee and Tiffany returned directly to Sunnyside by car, while Dale opted to fly his private plane to his hangar before driving home. Unbeknownst to them, upon their arrival home after their 2.5-hour journey, they were ambushed almost immediately upon entering. Tiffany was fatally shot in the head first, followed shortly by Glee, who was shot multiple times. 30 minutes later, as Dale arrived in the driveway, unaware of the tragedy that had befallen his family, he too was fatally shot as he opened the door from the garage into the house. The perpetrator, having stayed in the house, lay in wait for Dale, who had no idea that he had very little time left to live. 2 days later, 21-year-old Dana Ewell, the youngest member of the family, reached out to relatives and friends in Sunnyside, expressing his inability to reach his parents. Despite residing with his parents, Dana had spent the Easter weekend in San Francisco, around 200 miles away, with his girlfriend Monica Zent and her father John Zent, an FBI agent. On Tuesday, April 21, 1992, the Ewells' longtime housekeeper, Juanita Avenita, arrived for her usual work duties. Upon entering the kitchen, she discovered Tiffany's lifeless body lying face down in a pool of blood, her hands tucked beneath her. Distraught, the housekeeper sought help from a neighbor, prompting a call to the police. Meanwhile, Dana was still in Monterey, California, at the time of the murders. Upon being contacted by the authorities, his girlfriend's father promptly arranged for Dana to fly to Fresno. Dana appeared visibly distressed throughout the ordeal. Subsequently, the police embarked on an extensive investigation, dedicating numerous days to gathering evidence and interviewing witnesses. The crime scene was meticulously staged to resemble a failed robbery, but seasoned detectives recognized the signs of a premeditated burglary designed to make it appear as though the family stumbled upon the intruder and was subsequently murdered. Upon closer inspection, detectives noted several anomalies: the absence of weapons, bloodstains, footprints, or DNA evidence. Instead, the detectives observed a methodically planned and executed attack. The precision of the assailant's shots was remarkable, with only one miss, and the perpetrator had even retrieved the spent bullet casings. Inside the home, investigators discovered a box of 9mm ammunition purchased by Dale, later determined to have been used in the killings. Although the home gave the appearance of being ransacked, no valuable items were actually taken. There were no signs of forced entry through windows or doors, and the alarm, typically activated, had been deactivated. The scene seemed deliberately arranged to suggest a burglary in progress upon the Ewells' return. Investigators meticulously delved into the backgrounds of the victims, searching for any clues that might link to their homicides. Dale's past involvements, including selling airplanes for an individual later convicted of drug smuggling in the 1970s, and a problematic real estate transaction with his brother that threatened to cost investors millions, underwent thorough scrutiny. However, both incidents were eventually dismissed as having no connection to the murders. The police systematically eliminated all other potential suspects with motives, ultimately focusing their attention on Dana, who stood to benefit greatly from the tragedy. Being the sole survivor of the Ewell family and the primary beneficiary of the estate, Dana naturally became a person of interest. Despite having a seemingly airtight alibi, being in the company of his girlfriend and her FBI agent father at the time of the murders, police couldn't shake their suspicions about him. Dana's behavior did little to assuage their concerns, only serving to heighten their intuition regarding his involvement. Despite outward displays of distress over the murders, including offering rewards for information and even a $50,000 reward for the capture of the killer, Dana's grief appeared disingenuous. His emotional response to the brutal slaying of his own family seemed lacking, failing to convey the expected horror and anguish. Instead, his focus appeared to be primarily on matters related to his parents' wills and inheritance, rather than mourning the tragic loss of his loved ones. In a particularly unsettling move, he even invited a friend to tour the house, where bloodstains and spatter were still visible, displaying a disturbing lack of sensitivity. Allegedly, he even expressed disdain for the police investigation, claiming they were a bunch of dummies that would never solve the case. Thus began a prolonged and tense game of cat and mouse between Dana and the authorities, spanning 3 grueling years as they pursued every possible lead. Adding fuel to the escalating conflict, Dale's brothers reached out to authorities, accusing their nephew of wrongdoing. They alleged that during the reading of the wills, Dana had flown into a rage upon learning that trust provisions would restrict his access to the $8 million estate until he reached his 30s. According to their account, Dana had even slammed his fist on the desk and shouted, "How could he have done this to me?" referring to his father. The arrangement stipulated that his parents would cover his expenses until he turned 25, followed by receiving investment dividends until he reached 30. Half of it would be accessible to him at the age of 30, with the remaining half available at 35. Before the funerals for Dale, Glee, and Tiffany, the Ewell brothers took steps to hinder Dana's efforts to claim what he believed was rightfully his. However, Dana managed to secure around $300,000 from an insurance policy that either wasn't subject to the trust provisions or had been overlooked by mistake. Dana's uncles, his father's 3 brothers, were actively preventing him from inheriting any portion of his father's assets and wealth, causing significant frustration for Dana. Despite the mounting pressure from investigators closing in on him and accusations from members of his extended family implicating him in the murders as a ploy to gain control of the family estate, Dana continued to live his life seemingly unaffected. He continued to spend money recklessly, splurging on lavish gifts for his girlfriend Monica, and even contributing towards her educational expenses. However, the source of his seemingly endless funds remained a puzzle. Suspecting that money played a significant role in the murders, investigators intensified their scrutiny. They uncovered evidence indicating that Dana had been embezzling money from various sources, including his grandmother's $400,000 trust account. By the time detectives intervened, the elderly woman had been left with a mere $2,000 to cover her ongoing care expenses at a nursing facility. The revelation that Dana had exploited his vulnerable grandmother for financial gain only solidified the police's suspicions about his character. Despite this damning discovery, authorities still needed conclusive evidence linking Dana to the murders before they could make an arrest. One of Dana's college acquaintances, who was usually captivated by his elaborate tales and his portrayal of a pampered, affluent lifestyle, was one Joel Radovchich. Joel found Dana intriguing, especially his wealth, success, and apparent ability to effortlessly attract the most attractive women. People around them were puzzled about what they had in common, as they were as different as night and day. While Dana sought higher social status, Joel was more interested in video games, firearms, and explosives. Despite their disparities, Joel's friendship with Dana provided him access to exclusive parties and introductions to desirable women. Shortly after the murders, Joel had dropped out of school. As mentioned earlier, within weeks of the Ewell family's tragic demise, he visited their home for a tour, eventually becoming Dana's roommate in the same residence. Joel's association with Dana marked a crucial turning point in the investigation. Both Dana and Joel began making unusual cash purchases, such as helicopter piloting lessons, despite Joel lacking an apparent source of income. As a result, both individuals came under surveillance, and investigators observed their communication, which was through sophisticated pagers and payphones. Authorities had Dana's pager cloned and wiretapped his landline. In May 1993, Joel was overheard by an officer conversing on a payphone where he was recorded saying, "They don't have evidence. They will try to catch you in a lie." On another occasion, he was heard advising, "Just play the game." And without a doubt, Dana continued playing the game, buying his girlfriend a new car and covering her law school tuition. After exhausting the insurance payout, as previously mentioned, he bilked $400,000 from his grandmother's account, leaving her with only $2,000 to cover her nursing home expenses. In 1994, investigators shifted their focus to forensic analysis, which revealed that the murder weapon was a specialized 9mm assault rifle manufactured in Colorado. Records from the company indicated that such a rifle had been purchased by one Ernest Jack Ponce shortly before April 1992. Interestingly, Jack happened to be a high school friend of Joel. Upon questioning, Jack initially denied buying the gun and later claimed it was purchased as a birthday gift for himself, unknown to Joel, and alleged that the gun had been stolen. The evidence was mounting against Dana and Joel. At one point, detectives attempted to unsettle Dana during their visit to his university dormitory, informing him of their belief that Joel was responsible for murdering his family. Dana remained silent, his face visibly drained of color. After the detectives departed, unaware they were being observed, Dana and his girlfriend Monica, who was present during the visit, hurriedly made a phone call to Radovchich. On March 2, 1995, the police took action and arrested Dana and Joel. Joining them were Peter Radovchich, Joel's brother, and Jack Ponce. Peter had struck a deal with authorities, offering testimony against his brother and Dana in exchange for immunity. He confessed to the police that he had crafted a homemade silencer and attached it to the murder weapon, disposed of the gun barrel, Joel's tennis shoes worn during the killings, and a collection of gun enthusiast magazines. Peter admitted to carrying out these actions in collaboration with Jack Ponce. Upon his arrest, Jack provided a contrasting narrative regarding the firearm. He confessed to purchasing it for Joel, but claimed ignorance about its intended use in the murders. Additionally, he corroborated Peter's account of their joint disposal of evidence. Jack, like Peter, received immunity in exchange for his testimony at trial. As a result of Peter and Jack's statements, the barrel of the murder weapon was located buried in a dirt field in Reseda. Dana and Joel, however, were obviously not offered any plea deals. Instead, they were charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder and special circumstances, rendering them eligible for the death penalty. The trial didn't commence until late 1997. Dana and Joel, who had once been close enough to travel to Mexico together, share flying lessons, and even live in the same house where Dale, Glee, and Tiffany were killed, now had separate legal representation and adopted different stances during the trial. Prosecutors contended that Dana's motive stemmed from greed, alleging that he had promised Joel a portion of the inheritance. Dana's attorney argued for his innocence, claiming that Joel and Jack had planned and carried out the murders. Meanwhile, Joel's attorney, acknowledging the weight of the evidence against his client, aimed to save him from the death penalty. During his testimony, Jack Ponce revealed that he not only purchased the murder weapon for Joel and aided in its disposal, but that Joel had also provided him the details of the events that transpired on that fateful day in April 1992, which he was ready to share. Dana had approached Joel, pleading for a favor which was hard for him to reject. Acting as the executor of Dana's plan, Joel entered the Ewell residence with specific instructions. Having meticulously prepared by shaving his entire body, Joel waited patiently for 12 hours, perched on a plastic sheet to avoid leaving any trace of DNA behind, even a small eyelash. He was also instructed to ensure no bullet casings were left at the scene. Tiffany was the first victim, passing by Joel without noticing him before he fatally shot her in the back of the head. Glee, however, caught a glimpse of the assailant and was struck by a bullet. Despite attempting to flee to the office, bleeding profusely, she was pursued and mercilessly shot multiple times by Joel, who then straddled her. In a chilling moment, just before firing the fatal shot, Glee locked eyes with Joel, recognizing him as a friend Dana had introduced to the family a month prior. After fatally shooting Glee, Joel proceeded to change the magazines in the gun and don fresh gloves, awaiting Dale's arrival. He subsequently murdered Dale as well. However, during Jack's testimony recounting Dale's murder from Joel's perspective, he had made a crucial error by mentioning "and I saw the eye," which undermined the credibility of his testimony. The jury viewed his account with skepticism, suspecting greater involvement than he had admitted, but his immunity agreement shielded him from facing charges for the deaths. On May 27, 1998, 8 months after the trial commenced, the jury unanimously found Dana Ewell and Joel Radovcic guilty on all charges. However, they were unable to reach a consensus on the sentencing. While 2 votes spared Joel from the death penalty, Dana narrowly escaped the same fate by only 1 vote. They both received 3 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. Dana was incarcerated at Corcoran State Prison, located 50 miles south of Fresno, where he found himself among fellow inmates including notorious figures like Charles Manson. Unfortunately, his grandmother, whom he had stolen from, passed away in 1999. In the years following his conviction, Dana professed to have undergone a spiritual transformation, embracing Christianity. He is registered on an online prison pen pal platform, where in part of his profile he states, "A finance graduate from Santa Clara University. I was beginning my career in investment banking when some extraordinarily painful events turned my world upside down." Meanwhile, Joel Radovcic was imprisoned at Mule Creek State Prison in Ione, about 2 hours south of San Francisco, which has housed other infamous inmates such as Tex Watson and Robert John Bardo. Jack Ponce went to law school, eventually becoming an attorney. Monica Zent ended her relationship with Dana, completed her law school studies, and established a thriving law practice. While Monica was scrutinized during the investigation, no evidence implicating her involvement could be uncovered, aside from her apparent reluctance to engage in the case that led to her boyfriend's convictions for murder and the fact that he had utilized some of the ill-gotten funds to contribute towards her law school expenses. Greed, entitlement, heartlessness, 3 words that perfectly described Dana Ewell. Dana's insatiable desire for wealth and his willingness to manipulate and betray those closest to him ultimately led to the brutal demise of his own family. It is sad and unfortunate what befell the victims of this tale at the hands of their avaricious and manipulative brother and son, along with those who aided him.